All right, y'all, welcome to the latest episode of Beyond the Headline. This is where we take an article from the press, unpack it with a subject matter expert to hear their take. Did they get it right? Is there more to say? What can we talk about to really uncover what the media is talking about? So today I'm super excited. I'm going to be talking with Joy Moore. Joy is the CEO and co-founder of Tag Fundraising, which is an AI-powered platform that helps student athletes raise money. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Joy's background, and then I'll kick it over to her to introduce herself as well. But Tag has gotten support from Generator and Builders and Backers accelerator programs, and was also selected for the Bronze Valley Investment Accelerator. So before Joy founded Tag, she spent 14 years in business operations and development at high growth edtech companies. Some you may know, like Google Classroom, Paper, ClassKick, Apps Without Code, and she even led some digital launches for the NFL Play 60. So also would be remiss not to add that she is a mom of two student athletes herself, so obviously has a very personal connection to her mission and what she's building at Tag. So Joy, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here. A little bit about me. I'm a mom of two student athletes. That is really at the core of the founding of TAG. I believe in building technology to really solve for the problem that you're experiencing. And being on the sideline, I just saw the problem, got to have a lot of conversations with parents and coaches about the problem. And so just one day a light bulb kind of went off where it was like, there's a better way to do this. There's a way to leverage technology to do this in a way that I think could better serve myself and my community. And so that's sort of how we got here with TAG. Additionally, I'll add, it's very much a family business. You know, my two kids are three sport student athletes themselves. And my husband also owns and operates Arsenal Combat Sports Club, which is the largest combat sports club in Northern Alabama. So we've been a family operating that for 7 years now. We have a very large kids martial arts program. So I get to see, real time as a coach, as a parent, what these families are going through when it comes to tournaments and registration fees and travel. So we're in the thick of it as a family. And so I think it absolutely informs my perspective and my position when it comes to youth sports fundraising.
That makes a lot of sense. And thanks for sharing more about your family business with everybody being so immersed in it. That's amazing. But yeah, I'm looking forward to and also a little bit nervous to have this conversation with you because I am a mom as well. And my kids aren't quite in that spot yet. They're a little bit younger. So I've got a toddler and then a baby as well. So they will get to that point, I'm sure, when they start doing sports. So I'm going to be digesting this from the perspective of entrepreneur, but also mom, and taking any guidance and advice that you have.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So I'm excited about this conversation because the article that we're talking about is a little bit different because it's not written necessarily by a reporter, but it's from the New York Times, and it's one of the polls that they do from the Learning Network. So they actually gather responses from young people based on a prompt, and it's their actual voices. So it's the folks that are directly in the thick of it, these student athletes, and the name of the piece, which they called, is What Teenagers Are Saying About the Rising Cost of Youth Sports. So it hit the nail on the head about the problem that you're trying to solve. So just to kind of give a little bit of an overview, it's again, we're hearing directly from the students in this piece, and, they're talking about a couple different aspects of the challenges and the blockers that they experience. So for our listeners who maybe aren't deeply connected to this problem, they don't know it from the perspective of where you're sitting. Can you just kind of paint the picture for us of how youth sports became so expensive? How has this happened over time? Because I think everybody can probably understand that it wasn't like this decades ago. Or how did we get to this place where we're at now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think sort of at the root of that is the fact that it didn't really happen over time in the way that many things happen with our economy and with our society. If it had happened over time, there would have been really more research and consideration. There would have been more programming and really just more community outrage around what we're seeing in the trends and all of that. It kind of turned on a dime. And what I mean by that is COVID happened. And when COVID happened, a lot of things happened at the same time, and the things that had less priority in our lives just didn't get the focus and the research and attention that it probably needed. And I believe that youth sports is very much in that space. So a little bit about the history of that. Pre-COVID, sports were very much, though increasing in cost at the time, they were still very much community driven. They were supported by booster clubs and police rec leagues and community centers. And there was more city and regional funding through parks and recreation for programs, and really more comprehensive programs. I think the core of that, though, is that it was volunteer led. So there was always an available adult or available group of adults that dedicated time into developing a community sport in a region and connecting with these student athletes. When COVID happened, we all went inside for a bit, and a lot of programs closed. So a lot of jobs, a lot of people that were employed by those programs, as well as just programs that existed at that time, just shut down entirely with the uncertainty of when we're going back into the gym or when we'll be able to be back in close proximity. And when we came back outside, of the many things we were worried about, youth sports was not at the top of the list. So you fast forward a couple of years, and that absence has not, that void hasn't been filled by new program leaders, new administrators, and people that really have prioritized youth sports in an area. Simultaneously, what happens is anytime you have a big need in an industry, you have a big need, and you don't have that need being met by the community or city and town grants and land grants and things like that, you really do have the opportunity for private equity. And I think what private equity sees is there's a big demand. There aren't enough youth sports programs. There's not enough soccer. There's not enough baseball. There's not enough golf in the way that it used to be, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And so now there's just an opportunity for pay to play. And so that's what we've seen in the past 5 years, the rise of pay to play, which really just separates those who can afford to be in a structured, organized program and those who can't. And those who can't, that population, that pool of people that sit in the those who can't bucket, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're starting to see the impact throughout the communities where we lack play and access to equitable play.
Thanks so much for touching on the history of kind of how we got here and then the private equity piece too, because I don't think many people are thinking about it from that way. I think it's just this is the community and this is what seems so close to me. But I love that you're talking about it. There's this huge opportunity to grow this and to have other financial backers come in and to increase the impact overall. So I love that. Thanks for that context.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add also, if there's opportunity for private equity, there's opportunity for small business. So I think small business is often last to get on board. But if there's this huge, windfall that's coming for private equity, enough for them to want to jump in and get involved in these previously community level programs, I think we absolutely need to kick it in gear and start organizing amongst ourselves to provide the opportunities for our kids.
Amazing. There's a ripple effect. So you just got to have those eyes and ears open and identify those triggers to take
Absolutely.
advantage. Yes. Amazing. Let's unpack the problem a little bit more. So one of the things in the responses from the kids, which broke my heart reading, was just that they're internalizing the financial stress, which is just heartbreaking. Like you wouldn't think, I don't know, young kids today are so mature and everything. So I wasn't expecting that part of it. But one student talked about describing the feeling like he had to perform well just to like justify the
Mhm.
cost that his parents were investing into it. So I'd love to hear your take. What does this big financial investment, like how does it impact the child's relationship with the sport and, when money becomes a part of the equation in this way?
Sure, that's a great question. I believe that the saddest part is the stress. I think when you have families that are able to enjoy the experience of youth sports, it's amazing. The families getting excited, they're packing up the car, they have snacks, they have their chairs. Everyone's going to the field ready to see their child have fun and enjoy a sport. And when you have the burden of the cost of it, And so I can get into day of cost, but just overall registration costs, how much it costs to play, how much it costs for equipment. But then you layer on what you now see in more of the private leagues, which is now we have tournament entry fees, or we have a wristband for the weekend where my kid is playing, and it may be $50, for the whole tournament, maybe $25 a game, it may be $30 for parking, maybe another $40 for a hot dog. Like the weekend has now gone from an enjoyable experience where my kid is playing a sport that they enjoy to I've had to shell out so much money to do this. And then I'm paying even more money the day of. And that's on the back of my brain, as we're trying to enjoy the day. And if kids are nothing, they are observant and they are sponges. So, as much as you may internalize that and try to hide that from kids, you can see it, amongst the parents. And I absolutely know that kids feel that. And an example would be non money related. When we are running late anywhere, not just to youth sports, but when we are running late, I turn into a different person. My kids know the different person I've turned into. They know how to manage me and handle me accordingly. And these are children, and so they're very hyper aware to what stress does within their family, and financial stress included. But that weight means that they have a harder time enjoying the sport that they've come out to play because the stakes are higher. A byproduct of that is also that they don't get to play as many sports. If we're investing in basketball and we want you to train and be good in basketball because we're spending a lot of money and we're hyper aware of that, we're not thinking maybe this summer he wants to do swimming, or maybe this season he wants to do baseball, or maybe next season he wants to do wrestling instead. The stakes are so high and the cost is so high. We want to hyper focus in one sport. And there's a lot of research that suggests that actually leads to more injury because you're exerting the body in one very specific way all the time, as opposed to what used to happen, which is you'd play 3, 4, 5 sports, in your youth sport career, and became better conditioned as a result.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just, as a parent, I'm internalizing so many things right now. Just, what we did, the being late, that's so funny. But yeah, I can 100% relate to that. And it's so true that children and, young teens and young adults are sponges. And so it's sad that they, on the one hand, it's a great skill to have, but on the other hand, it does, it makes you think about quite a bit. So yeah, thanks for breaking it down like that
Yeah.
for us. But yeah, getting a little bit more into the data for people who maybe aren't aware, like how much it actually costs. Because it's funny, we're talking about the $40 hot dog, which is so true. You're like, oh my goodness, $40 for a hot dog, when you're at the stadium. But it is so much more than that. And I hear people talk too about, tournaments and the travel, staying at the hotel, when you're getting to a certain level, I imagine. But there's so much that goes into it that folks may not be thinking about. So just some numbers here for context for folks. So costs are up 46% since 2019, according to some data from the piece. And so this makes youth sports a $40 billion industry. But interestingly, they do note that participation rates among teenagers are declining. So, in kind of thinking about this for folks who are saying, well, how does this connect to my kids' rec league? Like, help us understand that, well, how this touches every youth sports, not just like elite. You know what I mean? I think people
Mhm.
think, oh, you're at this elite level, but it sounds like it's really all levels. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of our slogan with TAG is "We Power Play." And we had worked on that and mulled around, what is at the core of what we do. And we always wanted to focus on play. It is not that you are getting a scholarship to go D1 or that you are going to go play in the pros. And I think when families hyperfixate on those type of outcomes, it really disenfranchises the kids and puts too much emphasis on areas that are outside of their control and are outside the arena of play, which is where we want to focus our work. So, where you have the only option in your area is an elite rec league, either a pay to play team or an elite team that you've tried out for and gotten into, now you are restricted in what you can do, or even in the sports that you can do. Where I grew up in Connecticut, outside of New Haven, Connecticut, every sport was around. You could play hockey, you could play baseball, you play, you can do bowling, you can do tennis. Like there was a program for everything, whether it was paid or not. And now in many communities, you have two, three options. It's very difficult for you to find a program. Here in Huntsville, we discovered a fencing program 2 years ago, and my son started doing fencing. He only did it for 1 year. But what a cool, unique thing to have an opportunity to like sort of add to your arsenal. And so as the cost goes up and the options go down, so does a child's desire to play, to get involved with different programs or to explore what different options are. If I don't like soccer and basketball and football, then can I play a sport? Are there other sports that maybe appeal to me in a different way? So it does contribute to an overall limitation and a loss of access to play for everyone, that this is the climate that youth sports is in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, kind of putting it into context, I think, for everybody, because I think it is normal for folks to just say, oh, well, you have an elite athlete, so of course you're going to be paying for a million tournaments and all these different things, but it really is something that impacts all families. So let's talk a little bit more about tag and what y'all are building there. So I think when some folks think about, fundraising, kids fundraising for their sports, they think about the traditional ways of like have a bake sale, have a yard sale. What are your thoughts about the evolution of the fundraising mechanisms? And, is that model broken? And, what inspired you to build tag the way that you have built it?
Yeah, great question. So I think there are a couple of problems to solve for, and certainly fundraising does not solve for the cost problem. I do believe that fundraising and having consistent community support will increase the number of available programs. So where you have coaches that are not entirely out of pocket paying for everything, or losing players because they can't afford registration fees or they can't afford tournament fees, where that adds a lot more stress to a coach. Solving for funding is just one thing to keep that coach in the game, to keep that coach coming back next year and saying, I do want to continue doing this. I see the value. I see where we're advancing and getting better. And I'm not simply just churning students because of cost. So one side of it is solving for money. But the other side is solving for community. As we have more programs and as we have more engaged volunteers, we can build up and cultivate a more community based culture when it comes to these sports. So things like training around coaching and how to build your own rec league and how to organize your own tournaments, and providing the education to communities to start to bring back some of these community focused programs. That's one of the initiatives of TAG, but that comes behind getting the programs the funding and then being able to expand the network. And maybe we have 4 teams, 8 teams, 20 teams, but now we're looking at different options within a community rather than the same sort of national level large organizations that come in and do, flag football or soccer, and that's all that the community has to pick from.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So the storytelling piece of it too, correct me if I'm wrong, I would think very much plays a part in terms of conveying the impact and the need and the outcomes. So how does storytelling, athletes being able to share their stories and their needs, how is that a part of the tag platform?
Yeah, so what TAG ultimately does is it puts technology behind something that the community already does. We ask for money. We ask our families for money. We ask for donations. You will find walking into a grocery store, kids out front saying, hey, we're fundraising for our football team. So these are things and activities that are happening regardless. You mentioned bake sales and car washes and things like that. These are things that are happening. So all we're doing is facilitating the ability to tell that story and collect that donation directly. So it gives now I have a QR code or I have a web page that has more specifics about what I'm actually fundraising for. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've ever been anywhere and someone's come up to you with like a laminated page of like a photo of their, baseball team, and like, we're raising
Yes.
for uniforms, give me cash.
Yes.
Okay, that poses a whole bunch of other problems with like kids standing in parking lot or standing in traffic and like collecting cash and all of that. As a parent, the logistics of that stress me out so bad.
Yes.
So part of the founding of TAG was just, let's get them a webpage where they can have all the details about their team. What type of team? What are they fundraising for? What do they need? How can I support? Can I support with money? Can I support with in-kind donations?
Mm.
Give some options to how a community can engage with that team, and then allowing them to take that technology out in the world where they're already fundraising. We've just given them the tools to do it more effectively. And then the second part of that is pushing for community engagement. This is the feature that allows you to collect fans, right? So you're collecting family, friends, grandma, your barber or your hairdresser. You can collect fans anywhere. They can sign up to follow you and see what's going on with the team. And with that, give micro donations whenever there's a new update or they choose to. And then the last part of that is connecting with sponsors. So there are tons of businesses in town. There are tons of businesses that will give you money if you ask and if you have a clear ask. And that comes with part of the fundraising strategy. So we help them understand, what does fundraising entail? What does a proper sponsor ask entail? What does a sponsor get? What's the motivation for a sponsor to even give you money? Yes, there's a feel good component of it, but there's also the return on investment. I want a logo on the page, or I want my name on the t-shirt. So being able to facilitate all of those things in an organized, fast way allows for a team to fundraise and get to their goal a lot faster than if they're out in a parking lot with a laminated sheet saying that we're fundraising.
I feel like you're providing these kids with so many different skills too. They're learning how to talk to business owners. So that could be like a fear, like a public speaking, learning how to communicate effectively. To your point, having a very clear ask. We all know in a business environment, you need to have a very clear ask. So for finding those skills and asking for the sponsorship, what is it going towards, what's going to be the benefit to the business, it's very like business minded. So I feel like you're teaching them all these different skills within this, one project, so to speak, that they're working on.
Exactly. And let me shout out my first job. They do not consider themselves a job, but I will tell you, I was a Girl Scout.
Okay.
And I was the Girl Scout. Like, I could hustle a cookie like nobody's business.
And they have a great product too, so that
Absolutely.
doesn't hurt.
Great product, a great delivery system, great network. I mean, just a great strategy. And I do think that that experience, my first job, not really my first job, but that experience definitely sits in the back of my brain when it comes to thinking about what TAG can do and how TAG can activate a community and even student athletes to fundraise on their behalf, including the aspect that is financial literacy that goes along with fundraising and budgeting and understand what things cost, which, as a mom of two student athletes, I really appreciate my kids understanding what this little weekend is costing us.
Exactly. Let's put a dollar figure on the reality of everything that's happening here. It's important, and not, again, not from a guilt perspective, but just from an awareness perspective of this is what it takes to walk through the world and, pay for the hotel and, pay for the parking and the hot dog, everything. Yes. So, as we've talked about, it's about more than just fundraising, of course. That's a piece of it, but really you're building communities, you're providing opportunities, you're giving students choice and access to different sports. So you're doing so much more than just providing a tech platform. So I'd love to learn from you, what's like the one problem that you feel like you're really trying to solve, that maybe feels the hardest or maybe just the most important in what you're working on?
Oh, that is a great question. The one problem we're solving for is really encouraging more play and removing whatever obstacles and whatever barriers exist to getting more kids consistently and actively playing more sports. Not just playing the one sport that is like your keystone sport, but like, we should be playing different things. We should be enjoying our youth. And I strongly believe that a society that cannot support and develop good citizens, good people, resilient, determined, positive, confident young people will have to deal with the fruits of what we produce. And so I'm very concerned that youth sports has had a nosedive in the way that it has, that certain communities are boxed out entirely when it comes to engaging and play accessibility, because I think that that shows up in our communities in different ways. in the long term. Additionally, there's a hit to the sport, and this is like my long tail theory when it comes to sport fanship. A lot of fans come from having played the sport. So when you look at baseball or you look at hockey, and over the past few years, you're starting to see a decline in attendance, it's directly correlated with 8 to 12 years behind dropping in actual participation in that sport. So the sports that we love and that we fund and that make, billions and billions of dollars absolutely thrives from the actual players at the youth sports level. If you pull the players out at the youth sports level, 8 to 10 years down the line, we no longer have the attendance for the sports that we love and that make so much money.
That's a very real perspective to have, thinking about, it may not be top of mind now, but the declines now are going to impact 10 years from now. So yeah, the NFL, etc., other, are they listening? Pay attention. Make sure to keep funding the youth sports as well.
Exactly. And I think the professional leagues are aware of this, or they're becoming more aware of this. It's really interesting information because if you back up about 10 years with hockey in Canada, there's a lot of research and following along of what's happened there. They had a big spike about 10, 12 years ago in equipment and ice rental, the facility rental, and all of that. And it reduced the number of players. And they're actually seeing a correlated decline in viewership with hockey now. And so
Oh,
some
wow.
of that research is cited with some of the other professional leagues for the US. And I believe very strongly that is why the NFL is heavily invested in flag football now. And launching NFL flag teams, getting very heavily into girls flag football, which is like my new favorite sport. It is like the most
Amazing.
entertaining thing to watch. But there's a big investment in new programs at the youth sports level by these very large professional leagues, because I do believe they do already know that half of their viewership is going to come from people that played at some level.
100%. Yes. So there's hope for the future.
Oh, absolutely. If I'm nothing, I'm optimistic.
Well, we need more people like you, Joy, doing things that you're doing and building solutions and tech that are making a difference. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, we've covered so much. I would love to share with the viewers, if folks want to learn more about you or Tag Fundraising, where can they find you?
Cool. Teamtag.co. TEAMTAG.co. That's the center of everything. All of our information and updates and events are also listed there. You can certainly, of course, find us on LinkedIn. We do have webinars that are coming up where we are training in fundraising. So we wanted to connect directly with coaches and parent volunteers and team administrators to walk through exactly how to fundraise to get what you need covered by your community. Understanding and ask, understanding, who are even your options in your community that you should be going to look for funding for either a team or an entire new program that you may want to launch in your area.
Amazing. All right, folks, check it out. To join the webinars, follow Tag, and connect with Joy. But really appreciate you. Thanks for taking the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
See you later.